Hi everybody, welcome to the 5th annual Wharton Weitzman Future of Cities Conference. We are so excited to have everyone here today. We're so grateful for you being here and to everybody involved. It's been such an exciting adventure putting this together, and we can't wait for the rest of the day to unfold. So to get us started, we'd love to just introduce ourselves quickly. My name is Laura Francis. I'm a second-year city planning student at the Weitzman School of Design and a co-chair of the conference this year.
And I'm Casey Mann, an MBA student at Wharton, and one of the co-chairs as well. So this annual event was conceived as a place to bring people together from across campus to talk about cities at Penn. It's an interdisciplinary group. For example, our board here is about half Weitzman and half Wharton students. And our focus is on introducing fresh ideas, facilitating interdisciplinary conversation, and making the invisible visible.
So just to quickly touch on our theme today, the theme is embedded environments, this idea that there are so many technologies that are embedded into our built environment, and there's so many that are seen and unseen. And so the goal of today is, like Casey said, to make the invisible visible and really talk through what are the implications and what are the incredible possibilities of having such technology ubiquitous in our lives and in our cities. So, so first of all, we definitely want to thank our incredible team. Without every single person here, none of this would have come together the way it did. Definitely look out for everyone in the blue name tags. They're the ones to really say thank you to. And of course, thank you to our faculty advisors, Dr. Jeannie Birch and Dr. Susan Wachter. They're co-directors of the Penn Institute of Urban Research. Also, thank you to our sponsors. The incredible generosity of the group of folks that you see here is really what made today possible. We were able to sell student tickets at the lowest price of the conference history, and that's the kind of accessibility that we really want to offer to everyone at Penn to enjoy a day like today. Also, we are very excited that we have a raffle, but also a competition. So, thanks to the Lincoln Center for Performing Arts, we have 2 tickets to Saturday, February 24th performance of Deep River by Alonzo King Lines Ballet. So the idea is that tag us at Wharton Future Cities on LinkedIn or Instagram, and as simple as it is, the best content creator will win 2 tickets to the show in a couple of Saturdays. So if you have any questions about that, just let us know, but I think y'all get the rules.
Yeah, so we have a very packed agenda today. We will have 2 rooms going. The first is the salon, which is the room where you're sitting now, and the second is the drafting room, which is at the end of the hall. We have access to the full floor, so you're totally welcome to move back and forth, peruse the student research gallery, and move about to what interests you throughout the day. After this, we will move immediately into our first panel and demos, and that will be followed by a brief coffee break. We encourage you to look at the agenda and think ahead at what you want to do, because we'll be moving quickly through each event. Without further ado, we'd like to introduce my MBA colleague, Arfi, to introduce our speakers.
Hello everyone, welcome. I am very excited to introduce today's panel. As Casey said, my name is Arfi Coley. I'm a first-year MBA student, but prior to coming to Wharton, spent 5 years working at the New York City Mayor's office, which is why I'm especially excited as a native New Yorker to be introducing this panel. As our cities grow in size and density, the challenges and opportunities before us grow exponentially. In this landscape, the role that leaders in government and the private sector play, as well as technology, becomes even more crucial. Today, I'm thrilled to be joined by 2 esteemed leaders in New York City, Deputy Mayor of Operations, Meera Joshi, and Leah Johnson, the Executive Vice President, Chief Communications Marketing and Advocacy Officer for Lincoln Center for the Performing Arts. Together, we'll delve into their experiences and insights, discovering how they tackle unprecedented challenges through initiatives that foster resilience, inclusivity, and enhance the livability of our urban cities. Without further ado, I would like to pass the mic to Thabo Lenneiye, the Managing Director of the Sustainable Agriculture Fund at the Kleinman Center for Energy Policy in the Weitzman School of Design, who will be moderating today's conversation. So can we get a big applause, please?
Okay, let's see if I know how to turn the mic on. Morning. Thank you for having me, first of all, and congratulations, Laura and Casey, for an incredible job, and the team, Arti, thank you. So without further ado, I'll invite the two guests up to join me up here, Leah Johnson and Deputy Mayor Joshi. We're very excited to have this powerhouse of women up on the front stage to start us off. Woo! Okay, so we decided to not do the usual sort of reading through biographies in a sort of long fashion that, puts people to sleep first thing in the morning, and instead let the two ladies speak a little bit about their backgrounds. I think, we're in a room with students from Wharton and Weitzman, as well as across the university, a lot of young professionals here, and I'm sure they would love to hear a little bit about your journeys and how you got to where you are. And so I think, Deputy Mayor, from your roots in Philadelphia, which is fantastic, that you actually grew up in West Philadelphia, what led you to a career in New York City?
Good morning, everyone. I think this is on, right?
Yeah,
There we go. Okay, now it's on. Good morning, everyone. And first, I want to just quickly say thank you for everybody who's here, who's interested in cities. This is our future. There's so much potential. And when we're long gone, you are the ones who will hold that. So thank you for your interest. Meera Joshi, Deputy Mayor for Operations in New York City. There I oversee the city's infrastructure. It's our everyday, everyone's services. It's our concrete, our asphalt, our foundation. What makes this enormous machine of New York City move? It's thousands of miles of roadway and sewer lines, billions of gallons of water, clean water that comes out of faucets every day, and wastewater that's flushed every day. Sanitation, 24 million pounds of trash picked up every day. So it is an incredible system that continues to work, and I'd say silently, in the sense that we are doing our job best when nobody is commenting on the infrastructure of New York City, because it's just working, and you can come and live out your dreams in New York City, and everything that you depend on for your daily needs is happening. But I started in West Philadelphia, and I grew up on 48th Street between Baltimore and Chester. I think it was, my mother is here today. I want to thank my parents for picking that as a location. They both came from other countries, India and the UK, and they picked West Philadelphia because my father was a student at Penn and eventually working at Penn. So I grew up in the shadow of Penn University my whole life, and grew up in what I think is one of the most diverse places in the world. West Philadelphia had not only every race and culture, but every belief system, and not just the traditional belief systems, but sort of everything was okay. And so it was a shock for me when I left West Philadelphia to find out the rest of the United States is not at all like that, and learned what a Confederate flag is, and things that we just didn't learn about in West Philadelphia. But I think that it was truly a starting place that has shaped, it has absolutely shaped the rest of my life and the choices that I've made. But I was fortunate to go to Penn as well for undergraduate and law school. And I don't know if they still have it. They had an amazing Children of Faculty Benefits program for tuition remission. And then went to New York City and worked in large law firms, then in white-collar criminal defense law firms, joined the city in 2002 as the Inspector General for the Department of Corrections, where we investigated corrupt correction officers. Then I joined an agency that investigated police officers. Eventually I went on to run the Taxi and Limousine Commission in New York City, And from there, I actually went to run the regulatory agency that the nationwide regulatory agency over trucking as part of the Biden administration, and then came back to New York City to become deputy mayor of operations. So it has been an amazing journey. I just say the focus has always been on people. We can talk about transportation, we can talk about infrastructure, but none of that matters if it's not centered on the people that work in the industry and that have to use it, because otherwise we're solving problems that didn't need to be solved, and we're ignoring the ones that do.
Incredible journey. It's fantastic. Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Leah.
Thank you. That's incredible. I am not a native of Philadelphia, but a native of Brooklyn, New York. I hope, yes. We always get shout outs. We are all over the place. But grew up in Brooklyn, went to Harvard College, had no idea what I wanted to do, but it always sort of had a notion of impact. You know, my mom was one of these women who didn't go to college, who was completely involved in making sure that her two daughters would do everything in the world possible, and with my dad. And so she was just an advocate, and that's really how I thought about my career. So started out after college, I worked at Kings County. I worked at Health and Hospitals Corporation, which is the largest municipal hospital system at least at the time, in the country. And then I went to head up public affairs at Kings County Hospital. Did a variety of things after that. So my career has taken me from public sector into the private sector, back into the public sector. I had a desire to work for the first Black mayor of the city of New York, David Dinkins, and so I found my way there through working with the Districting Commission, which at the time was redrawing the city council district lines, expanding the city council from 35 to 51 seats, and which was a highly political situation. But I really began to understand every single pocket and every single community in the city of New York. And that really helped me to sort of have a foundation of understanding that you can't do anything in this city without thinking about the people that you are serving and without engaging with the people that you are serving. Went on to work for David Dinkins, his deputy mayor, Bill Lynch, ran his campaign, and I went on to become the press secretary for his re-election campaign. We lost. It was an amazing ride, though I will tell you it was one of my favorite. When I think back to my career, one of the most amazing moments was really working for the mayor. So you understand that, and so I worked in. I went into finance. So after I left, after the mayor lost, and I worked for the city controller, and that's where I really began to understand the city's finances. And then after that, I went on to work at Standard & Poor's and began to understand the global financial infrastructure, which is something that had not been taught to me at Tilden High School in Brooklyn. And so I did that. And then the biggest thing that was going on when I was at Standard & Poor's was the coming together of Citigroup. And it was travelers had come together with Citicorp to create this mega financial services institution called Citigroup. And I had the opportunity to go and work there. So that was a 9-year ride of seeing the city and seeing the world from a different perch. We were always involved in crisis, so we would need another 10 hours to talk about all the crises that we dealt with there. But it was a really interesting perch to understand sort of public-private partnerships as well. And then after that, I right as the 2008 crisis was happening, I left, became an entrepreneur. That was yet another set of challenges. And then right now, the job I'm in now, I met the person who was going to become the new CEO of Lincoln Center. I had never worked at a nonprofit. I had been on nonprofit boards. I had never worked at one. and born and raised in New York City, understood the challenges and the opportunities of Lincoln Center. And the mandate really, I started the same day as Henry Timms, the mandate really was to transform the place, to make it really open and accessible to all New Yorkers. And so I've been doing that for about 5 years. We'll talk a little bit on the panel about that, but it's been a wonderful ride and I'm happy to be here.
Amazing. Round of applause for our two speakers. Fantastic journeys. I think there'll be a lot of questions about your career paths, but before we sort of go into that, I wanted to jump into something, Leah, you mentioned this idea of public-private partnerships, which I think is an interesting place to start, given that you both talked about the importance of people, that it's all about the people. We're sitting at a conference that's sort of the intersection of design and business, and as we know, the private sector and design and, designing spaces and amenities for, the people is one of the most important things. How do we balance that? How do we make sure that we balance those two interests in the way that we form cities and make them open and accessible to everyone? Thoughts on that? So
I'll take that. I'll just give you a couple of examples of how we've thought about it at Lincoln Center. When I got there, we were in the process of renovating. Well, the process was stalled to renovate David Geffen Hall, which was formerly known as A.B. Fisher Hall. But the process had not been. The money had been. David Geffen had given $100 million, so some money had been raised, but things were not moving forward. So one of the first things we had to do was really think about how do we move this project forward. And the interesting thing is that coming from, with my city background, and Mayor Dinkins had started the first Minority and Women Business Enterprise program in the city. So when I got there, I remember I sat at the table and I said, okay, so what are we going to do regarding MWBE? And people looked at me and I said, so what are we doing? I mean, here it is, we have a massive project in the city that is going to be open and accessible to all. What are we doing to make sure that we have a workforce development program, workforce inclusion, and an MWBE program, so that for our construction contracts? And that was the beginning of really thinking about that. And so what we did was we put together for ourselves, we put together sort of where we wanted to go with our construction manager, Turner. We put together a set of goals of what we wanted to achieve. And the other thing that we thought about a lot was, and we achieved them, we surpassed them. And what we also thought about was the actual building. What is the message that you want to send to people in the city? So we made sure in the lobby, which the old David Geffen Hall was sort of closed off, we made sure that the lobby was open to the public, 50-foot media wall that would live stream for free all of the New York Philharmonic. This was their home, all of their concerts. The space would be open to people who were waiting for their kids to come in from ballet school or from high school students, whatever it might be. But the notion was to open this space up. So to reflect not only in how we were building this project, but also what we were building, to really incorporate the notion of inclusion. And I will tell you, when we graduated 30 people who we recruited locally from the training program in the 7 construction trades, and those 30 people went on to work on the David Geffen Hall project, and after that they got their union cards, and which meant lifetime employment as a construction, in the world of construction. That to me, plus all the other work that we did, was what we can and should be doing as public-private partnerships.
Thanks. And I couldn't agree more. Our public space is how we unify as a city, and it's the city's greatest asset, whether it's Philadelphia or New York. COVID reminded us of that in a very jarring way, but in a way that's actually revitalized private interest in investing in public spaces that may not otherwise have been revitalized. So in New York City, under the Adams administration, we've added about 40 football fields worth of new public space. And we're continuing to add every day because we live in a dense urban environment and our apartments are small. These are our backyards. These are our birthday party gathering centers. These are where we celebrate different social milestones. This is where community happens, where creativity happens. And so we have to ensure that we have enough and enough of it spread out across all 5 boroughs. But building and maintaining cities is more expensive than ever. Construction costs have gone up, and what we demand of our public space is increased. It can't just be beautiful, it's got to be durable, it's also got to be resilient. So in some cases it's absorbing water, it's protecting us from heat, as well as providing a respite. And so that means that our dollars, our city tax dollars, can't go as far. And we do have to lean on the private sector. We, for example, are doing a redesign of Fifth Avenue in New York City. Post-COVID, we have to think of our central business district as more than just a 9-to-5 office place or a Saturday shopping place. It's got to be 24/7. People's schedules changed. And so turning Fifth Avenue from Bryant Park to Central Park into a boulevard that people will come to as a destination means we have to widen sidewalks and really reimagine the entire avenue. And we are modeling something that hasn't been done in the city before, and that is in bringing in the business improvement districts along the way. They've each made a financial contribution to the redesign effort. And they're going to sit on the steering committee on how that redesign works. And that's actually an efficient process, because anytime you redesign public space, everybody has an opinion. And so everybody can stop it at any moment. The loudest ones are going to be your business improvement districts in a commercial district. Bringing them in early, having them be part of the design, cuts out the back and forth, as well as the financial contribution that they're providing. And the financial contribution in design is the precursor for the financial contribution in the capital construction. These are economic drivers. There was a report that came out from Bloomberg. The more we open our streets and we allow roadway, like outdoor dining, we actually see all of the businesses improve. So it makes sense economically for the city as well. But I do want to stress we're in a world in which city tax dollars are not going to be able to cover so many parts of the foundation of our city that are the platform for other entities to make business and grow their businesses. We see that with like our bike lanes. They're a great platform for all the delivery companies that are Uber Eats and Grubhub and the other. But we need help to make sure that infrastructure is funded and stays solid.
It's a really interesting point you bring up, Deputy Mayor, about sort of alternative mechanisms, financial mechanisms, and sort of the gap between tax dollars. I want to come back to that question, but first, Sheila, you brought up an interesting point about sort of creating economic access in a way through the way that you sort of set up the project. The construction of the project allowed for folks that might not ordinarily have been able to participate in the construction and delivery of a project, and then had longer term impact for them. I read somewhere that 75% of the visitors last summer at Lincoln Financial were all new visitors. And one of the goals is to sort of, as you pointed out, open up the space. And in the ethos of this conference, making the invisible visible, I'd like to hear a little bit more about some of the ways that you did that.
Sure. One of the things, when we started and when I started at Lincoln Center, we put together this, we were all like sort of dreaming, right? And I started in 2019, so this is right before the pandemic hit. So we started dreaming about what are the things that we should do to really open this place up. And we called it the Meera Project. And it never went anywhere as far as, the moniker, the Meera Project, but it was really thinking about holding up the mirror to ourselves. Right? And sort of looking at our own history and our own past, which I'll get to in a moment, and then reflecting our city, which we were not doing at the time, right? So who's on our stages? who can afford to come to Lincoln Center and these sorts of things. When you said you had, I was so gratified when you said that the pricing structure for this, to attend this event. One of the first things that we started experimenting with was choose what you pay. And that is from all of our events now are either free or choose what you pay. And that's for Lincoln Center for the Performing Arts. Not all of Lincoln Center is comprised of 11 different organizations on one 16-acre campus on the Upper West Side. But choose what you pay, the concept is that for all of our performances, you can pay $5 or less, or $35 or more. So you get to choose what you pay, and this has been enormous as far as getting people to see that not only is Lincoln Center opening up, not only can people see themselves on our stages, but when you come in, the price of entry you can actually afford, and once you get there, you feel as though you belong, because that is really a huge issue. The other thing about one of the other projects that we started, which is really, which we're just kind of taking off now, and we're working very closely with the city of New York, the Department of Parks is our partner. Lincoln Center was built as a result of urban renewal. All of you know urban renewal projects that went on across the country. And Robert Moses, in his infinite wisdom, destroyed a neighborhood called San Juan Hill and Lincoln Square. And this was in order to build Lincoln Center and Fordham and Lincoln Towers. And we started thinking about the invisible. I was born and raised in New York City. I had never heard of San Juan Hill. I never knew that San Juan Hill at the turn of the century was home to the largest Black population in the city. It was not the majority population in San Juan Hill, but it was the largest. And you know the history of the migration of the Black population sort of always being sort of thrown out of, areas from southern New York going up and up. And sidebar, I found out that because I'm an ancestry kook, and I found out that my grandmother was actually born in San Juan Hill. So I felt that my destiny was to actually work at Lincoln Center. Found that out when I was working at Lincoln Center. But we decided, so we were built with literally a wall. The wall goes as high as 25 feet at one point to the western side of campus, and on the other side of Amsterdam Avenue are NYCHA housing, right? Public housing. The eastern edge of Lincoln Center has this beautiful, warm fountain entrance. If any of you have ever been to Lincoln Center, it is wonderful. The Josie Robinson Plaza. It is beautiful. Opens up so gracefully to Columbus and to Broadway. Not the same on the western side. So we started looking at this, and we started a project. And it really is a participatory planning process, because we could have done it one of two ways. We could have said, well, this is what we want to do. Let's hire some design folks, let's hire some construction folks, and let's think about this. Or let's actually go out to the community and actually understand how they use Lincoln Center, what they'd like to see at Lincoln Center, and then let's feed that into a plan that we can then give to design teams. So we are working, and I have to say thank you, Deputy Mayor, and because this is a partnership, and this really is something that we must do together. So we are raising money for this. This is to create we have, the first part of the project is really focused on the performance park, which we call Damrosch Park, and to really rethink and reimagine that park, really think about that wall, right? Can we tear down that wall in theoretically, figuratively, and actually structurally? Can we do that? And I think the answer is yes, we can. But really to think about creating more open space, because as the Deputy Mayor said, the role of open spaces in our cities is vitally important. And making sure that we have open spaces that people feel that they can actually use in the community. So that is why, to date, we have surveyed and we have spoken to 3,400 people, many of whom are in the public housing right across Amsterdam Avenue to say, what should we be doing? What do you think? Have you ever come across campus? And the most amazing thing, I have spoken to individuals who say, this is the first time, I've lived here for, 40 years. This is the first time I'm actually walking inside one of your facilities here at Lincoln Center. So we can't have that anymore. So it really is creating the open space. It is in partnership with the city, and it is also creating opportunity for the arts to really be more integrated into the lives of people in our city. So that's the project that we're up to.
Fantastic, yeah. I think the sort of question of inclusivity and belonging and who does the city belong to is one that we can spend hours and delve into a little bit deeper, and I'm sure there will be questions about that. But I think what I'll do is change tracks a little bit to talk about cities and finance. And maybe I'll couple that with something that's sort of top of mind for cities the world over. I mean, weather-related events in cities everywhere in the world are increasing, by the numbers on an annual basis. And New York City, Philadelphia, we are no exceptions to that. And so I'd love to sort of maybe think about one, like, how do we finance some of this adaptation, this sort of creating more resilience in our cities against some of these things, but also how do we build cities that actually make sense given the future that we inevitably face? And I know Mayor Joshi, Deputy Mayor Joshi, that's like a big topic that you have been interested in, so I'd love to hear your thoughts on that.
Thank you. And I think that goes back to something I said earlier about our public space having to be double duty at all times. So we really all of us have to guard against rising tides, more torrential rain, higher heats, pollution, and that means that whenever we build, we also have to build with that in mind. We start with the base of our tax dollars, and we try to ensure that every public space initiative has this dual duty, that it is also absorbent or it's protecting from the heat. But that's not obviously enough. We have been fortunate with the passage of the bipartisan infrastructure law and the Inflation Reduction Act that there are several federal opportunities to fund these initiatives. So for example, we're currently competing for a public solar grant that would allow us to put solar panels on 5,000 low to moderate income homes across New York City. And we're pushing for tax rebates that would allow us to help fund what we do. We have the largest curbside organics program in New York City, but taking those banana peels and putting them in an organic wastewater digester and turning it into gas means that we can heat homes. And so the infrastructure and capital improvements that go along with that need to be funded somewhere, and fortunately through the IRA, we have the opportunity to help fund some of that work. So that is critical. And I think the other piece of it is, which is something we've been advocating for at the federal level on a nationwide level, is we have formula dollars for housing and transportation. People understand those are fundamental needs of cities, and so the federal government has for a very long time continuously given by formula money to states so that they can fund housing and transportation. We need federal formula dollars for resiliency. We have to compete each time for dollars to do big resiliency projects like creating seawalls, like creating blue belts, which are these huge ponds that we put in, and now we have a plan to put them in all 5 boroughs to absorb water that our sewer system will never be able to absorb. These are $50 to $100 million projects. They take lots of planning, but if it's a whack-a-mole system each year to compete for these dollars, it's very difficult for large urban environments to actually plan accordingly. And so I think it's time for the federal government to recognize that in the formula dollars that cities and states get, there needs to be a line for resiliency. Because right now, the way the system is set up, and I've spoken to FEMA and they're very honest about this, they're like, when the disaster happens, afterwards just grab everything. Because it's all about, you need money to repair after the disaster. None of it is really focusing on what can you do proactively. And so we have, for example, a really nascent but important initiative in New York City to get people to move out of their houses in neighborhoods where we know no amount of intervention is ever going to stop the flooding. And they're constantly going to have water in their basements, and I'm talking about Jewel Avenue in Brooklyn. And so, but we don't want to do that after storm. We want to do that when the skies are blue and the sun is shining and people can make plans and make rational decisions with time. But until we change that mindset at the federal level, cities are going to be at a disadvantage. Now, that doesn't mean we're not going to be aggressive and resourceful and do all those things anyway. We certainly are, and that's why we are competing aggressively for every federal dollar. And then in the planning of it, as we plan, ensuring that we are leaving no stone unturned. So when there are private developments going up, demanding that there be resiliency in those private developments, ensuring that every rezoning plan includes resiliency in it. It's not just about housing, it's about ensuring that communities can thrive, so there has to be the infrastructure involved in it. And really that collective acknowledgement that building isn't just about building anymore, it's also about protection.
Well said. Absolutely. So I think we're at the point where I should let other folks enter with questions in here. There probably are a lot of questions from the audience. While people think about their questions, since we don't have hands racing up at the moment, maybe I'll ask you some quick hit questions. So in 15 seconds or less, 3 questions that we have. Best career advice you ever received? What do you think about when you're not thinking about work? And what's on your streaming list right now? So best career advice, what you think about when you're not thinking about work, and what you're streaming right now.
Best career advice is you're really great, Leah, but really don't just focus on being an individual contributor. Really look around you, and as you are rising in your career, spot talent and bring that talent with you. Lift up that talent with you. So that was one of the best pieces of advice I've gotten. Streaming, I am fascinated with these documentaries that talk about how people at the top of their game work together to do something. So literally last night I was in my bed looking at, have you seen the We Are the World documentary?
Yes.
Oh my gosh, so all this, from Bruce Springsteen to Michael Jackson. So this is just amazing. So because I want to understand how do you bring all these talented people together? And I also just finished watching, again for 18th time, The Dream Team, about the 1992 Olympic basketball team, which I think is fascinating. So any of you in a place where you've got amazing talent around you, how do you think of bringing that together so that everyone is rowing in the same direction? So that's that. When I think about when I'm not working, I think about recipes. I like to cook, and I think about recipes, and I think about what I can do better than the latest restaurant I've been to in New York City.
High bar. Well, we have a competitive audience here, so you might have some kindred spirits.
I think the best career advice I got was nip it in the bud. So follow your instinct. If you think something is heading in the wrong direction, it is. Don't waste time. Just tell people, sometimes that means firing people. That's sometimes how that works out. Stopping a project and redirecting it. But you've got to follow your gut and stick with it. And the higher up you go, the more work may have gone into something and will seem like it's completely baked. But if it's still wrong, it's wrong. And just address it and take care of it. Going along with it will only come back to bite you. So really, follow your instinct and be decisive. When I'm streaming, I just finished watching Griselda. And for some reason, my job is very, it's very stressful. So when I compare it to the life of a female drug dealer, a bloodthirsty female drug dealer, it feels less stressful. And so I find it as a very good antithesis to like my daily life, because like I might be worried about angry politicians, but I'm not looking at the butt end of a machine gun, so I'm good. That's helpful. And what I think about sleep. I love sleep a lot.
Because I've been here.
Yeah, but I am going to say in all seriousness, as you get involved and you move up and you'll all have like extremely high performing jobs, don't discount the need to unplug. And sometimes that is only sleep, because we live in this world where we're constantly looking at our phones. And so you're not really unplugged when you're on vacation, because you're still looking at your phone. But you can't really address the complex problems that we address every day if you don't walk away sometimes and totally unplug. So, really have that balance in your life. I know that sounds corny. Everybody says, oh, balance, whatever. Just do it. Like, find some time to unplug and do something very, very, very different.
Okay, we heard it first here, make incredible food and sleep. So, with that, questions from the floor? I think we have a hand in the third row. Okay, we can start over there in the middle. Yes, there's a mic coming your way.
So, hello, okay, people. So, I wanted to get your impressions on the impact of COVID and people living and working in the city. Now there's a lot of, a lot of people are working from home, and I read in the news and see it in my daily life that commercial properties in the central business districts, there's high vacancy rates. But a couple of years ago, I think when this conference first started, that one of the sessions was "Our city's dying," or something along those lines. So, I went, being from New York City, I'd be curious to see your reaction. Thank you.
Absolutely not. It still takes, you still have to wait in line to get a good ticket, and you still have to make a reservation and wait a few weeks to get in a restaurant. New York is popping, like people everywhere. And I think that there was a tremendous fear that the work from home would really result in people not wanting to leave and not coming back to the city. But what we've seen over time is that actually that human bond to be with people is stronger than the convenience of work from home. Our office vacancy rate is still low, but we're looking at different ways to activate our space. Some of that office space can be turned into residential, and some of those business corridors can be activated into 24/7 public space corridors. But jobs are higher than ever in New York City, and we see that there is demand for new business openings and for residences as well. There's a very tight rental market, people are here, and many people have come back. I think the biggest mind switch in government is we have to think beyond the traditional 9 to 5. And that is a really exciting challenge for me, because the fact that people want to use the city in more times of day and more days of the week in more ways than we thought of before only opens up endless possibility. So though the spirit was attempted to be killed through COVID, I'm here to say that it has not. And I think it's actually extremely reassuring to us as humans that we actually like each other and we want to be together and we don't want to work from home. We do want to maybe one day a week, but actually those other 4 we prefer to be with our colleagues.
I just want to also add to that I think the arts play a huge role in that for 2 reasons. One is, when you're coming together, it's really sort of the peak human experience, right? When you experience something together, you're in community. So it makes you come out. It makes you, we're seeing numbers we had last year. During the summer, we had over 350,000 people visit Lincoln Center just for our Summer for the City programming, outdoors and indoors. So people are coming out because people are yearning to be together. The other thing is that as and the mayor just had his State of the City address where he basically said social media for young people. It's a health hazard. And so at the end of the day, the sort of antidote to the loneliness, to the isolation, right? People working from home, whatever it might be. We believe at Lincoln Center, the arts play a huge role in that. So I think it is really, really important, and that's part of this Amsterdam Avenue project that we have going on. More space to bring people in and together. But the arts just generally play, and New York City is a center for the arts. So I think that's another critically important issue.
Great. I think we had a question on the third row over here.
Yeah, good morning. And this maybe is more for Ms. Johnson, but have you kind of come across any challenges or pleasant surprises when beginning to engage with the neighbors that have historically been left out of the context and like building trust again amongst the neighborhood?
Yeah, it's been really, really interesting, and you raised the point of building trust, because you are absolutely right. It is a trust building exercise. I have been moved by the stories I have heard. I have spoken to people who watched the San Juan Hill community get destroyed, right, and rubble, the smoke and what have you. I have been moved by people who talk about being invited in for the very first time, and the notion that they have never been asked before what their opinion is. So that for me has been just more impetus that we are doing the right thing. Are there people who disagree? Yes. Are there people who say, leave my wall? I like my wall, leave it alone. And like, what do you mean you like the wall? Well, I wait for the bus on the wall, and it's a nice, it like I have a nice place to put my bag. It's like, okay, I think we can accommodate that. But yeah, so some things are, and look, there are other things. There are people who there are some people who want things to stay exactly the same. So, so we've got to figure that out. But it is largely, for me, it has been such an amazing experience, and it continues, right? So now we're going into the participatory design phase, where we will announce in a couple of weeks the design team, and so all of this information is being handed to the design team. So and then we want to then have the design team come with us to the community and say, what do you think about this? What do you think about that? So it's really been an amazing experience.
Fantastic. So I think we have room for two more questions. So one on the third row, one right behind you, RT, and then on the third row, and I think one at the back. So we can maybe take those three.
And maybe back to back, just so we can get them all in.
Okay. Yes. We can collect all three questions and then wrap up.
Thank you so much for being here. You've both talked a lot about partnerships and the idea of collaboration. I'm curious if you have an idea of moving into the future of New York City and cities in general, what partnership will look like at different levels of business. So are you seeing sort of partnerships amongst like the biggest players in the business world with sort of the small scale bids, or mom and pop shops, and sort of what that looks like maybe financially and beyond? Thank you.
I think at every level we'll see partnerships, but what it looks like will sort of depend on the level. At the smallest level, our outdoor dining program is a version of small business partnerships. They sign up for a revocable consent. It's a horrible term. There you go. But they agree to be allowed to use part of the roadway, and in return, they'll set up an outdoor dining structure that meets the requirements that we as a city set forth. And that's a partnership of sorts, And then at the highest level, it is really these large public-private partnerships. And I think one area where we hope to see more of that is especially in the movement of freight in Manhattan and the 5 boroughs. We have blue highways. We should not be bringing everything in by truck. We should be using those blue highways more and more. New York City brings, over 95% of its freight in by truck. That's a lot higher than the rest of the country, which is about 70%. But up until now, the economics haven't really forced logistic companies to, really push for us to improve our piers and push us to make sure that the landings work for them. We competed and got a grant from Myriad to upgrade a lot of our piers so they could be used better for loading and unloading, and we can switch to cargo bikes in Manhattan. This is another, with congestion pricing coming, this is going to be important for many of the freight movers to avoid trucks in Manhattan. But a lot more of our piers need upgrades, and those, again, these are hundreds of millions of dollars. These are not small endeavors. Their public-private partnerships, I can see, will play a huge role in the ability for us to make those investments. And, it's not a dirty word, right? That might mean that some logistic companies get access to those piers, but if in the end of the day that means less trucks on our street, that's a good thing. So I think at every level we have partnerships. It really depends on the size of the business and the terms of the arrangement.
Question on the second row? Yeah, please, go ahead.
Yes, so my name is John Williams. I'm a graduate student in my final year of Hunter College, planning. So I'm working on a studio project currently in Flatbush, Brooklyn. And I'm trying to get our team to tackle the Floyd Bennett Field. And we're doing an environmental assessment. We're gonna start off with that. The study area is all Flatbush. As you know, or some of you may not know, Floyd Bennett Field is housing some of our migrants. It's a very testy subject, especially with the community members within Flatbush and the surrounding areas. I guess this question would be for you, Joshi. What is your team doing to address the issue of the migrants in the unstable living quarters that they're in right now on Floyd Bennett Field? I know they were redirected during the storm to a public school, and then they got redirected back. It's not accessible in terms of accessibility for them to get to places to get to food and healthcare. So yeah, just how are you guys addressing that?
Thank you for the question, and if anybody hasn't been to Floyd Bennett Field, it's worth the visit. It is a really spectacular place, a huge green space, a huge amount of history. It was the city's primary airport, and you're connected to amazing beaches. And because it has so much land, when over 170,000 migrants that have come to New York City needed more space to live, it was a natural place for us to go. We have been a city of immigrants. We will always be a city of immigrants, but the amount of incoming migrants that we've had in a condensed period of time is more than a city can handle. And it's not a question of priorities or choices. It's just a raw fact. There's only so many dollars and there's only so many space. So in the beginning of the crisis, we really tried to put people in hotels. There was no more room at the inn, and so we have tents both on Randall's Island and on Floyd Bennett Field. And I don't know if anybody's been to those tents. These are the kinds of structures that are put up by professional companies throughout the nation when there are emergency, it's usually related to earthquakes or hurricanes and the like. But all of the structures are sound, the basic needs are there, and it's absolutely what we must do to keep people safe and warm. And as you mentioned, when there was threat of disruption from the last windstorm that we had, it was an actual amazing thing to watch how quickly and swiftly we were able to get all of those people in the tent to a nearby school, get them sheltered, and get them back again. And so I know there are many people that are sort of shudder at the thought of people living in a tent. This is reality. We have an immigration crisis in our country, and we're doing an amazing job of handling it in New York City with a level of professionalism and dedication that I would say you're not going to find anywhere else in the country. So what we see at Floyd Bennett Field is actually a combination of our Parks Department, our DDC, our Design and Construction Department that helps oversee the erection of the tents, as well as our emergency management and the federal government because it's actual federal parkland. And in exchange for allowing the tents to go there, we actually have to spend a lot of money doing improvements to Floyd Bennett Field. So this is not something that the federal government was exactly, sure, use our parkland. There's, we have the same issue at Randall's Island. Where there is space, it's usually not right next to a subway stop, right? So it is difficult for people to get to and from. But these are also, people that are coming in large volume where it's difficult wherever we house them. And so they're gonna have a different set of challenges, whether they're in a hotel in Queens or whether they're in a tent in Floyd Bennett Field. What ultimately we need to do is to ensure that they can work. The jobs are out there, they're here in New York City, the jobs are throughout New York State. But the way the system is set up now, it's very difficult for people to get work permits and to get out of this situation. They didn't come here to live in a tent, they came here to work and get a better life, and America has always offered that and always will. We can make good on that promise, but the lag in the time between when people arrive and when they're able to work legally is incredibly long.
Thank you for the response. I know it's a complex and very layered topic, and many of the topics that I think we've discussed today are such. Deputy Mayor Joshi and Leah will be available if you want to catch them for a few comments, like after, we have to wrap up the session. I'm getting sort of the eyes from the ladies in the front here. So for our closing remarks, I just want to sort of recapitulate that we've learned a lot today, that despite COVID, our cities are still vibrant thanks to sort of the arts and a lot of the work that's going on in the city. Banana peels might be the future to powering the city, which is great to know. Private and public money, which I think a lot of folks in here are interested in, can work hand to hand to make our cities more inclusive and more resilient to climate change. So with that said, I'll turn over the mic for one closing question to our two guests. What's one thing, given that you're sitting in the city of Philadelphia, that you think that Philadelphia needs?
Oh, that's a hard one, and I almost want to defer to my mother. I'll say Philadelphia is an amazing city. I think maybe what Philadelphia needs is to get a little bit more of the limelight.
Yeah, it's a good one.
I just came in. I think you need a better train station. That's all I'm gonna say. I couldn't quite figure out where I was going, but at least I thought 30th Street, and I knew it was okay. But yeah, that's all I can say.
Okay, fantastic. We'll work on that. Thank you, ladies, for